Guys, welcome back to another video on the Planet Football YouTube channel. Today we are going to be diving into another footballing reaction and we're going to be checking out Michael Laudrup. Thus the reason that I've decided to go for the Barcelona top in today's video. Now Laudrup, I don't really know all too much about, to be honest with you. Obviously, I know that he played for Barcelona at one point of his career, know that he had a brother, and I think it was him who was the Swansea manager at one point as well. But in terms of his actual playing days, way before my time, so this is going to be a really interesting one to check out. As always, if you did guys do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and keep getting your suggestions in the comments down below. Thank you to everyone who's got involved with this series so far. We're adding all your suggestions onto the list and we got quite a number of classic footballers to go ahead and check out, which I'm really looking forward to get into. But one that you guys did recommend was Michael Laudrup. So without any further ado, let's jump into this one. So let's dive into this one and find out just how good Michael Laudrup actually was. Pretty sure he was a midfielder, I want to say. Pretty sure.
The Ballon d'Or is worth nothing because Michael Laudrup never won it. Who's the best player in history? Laudrup. Pele was the best in the 60s, Cruyff in the 70s, Maradona in the 80s, and Laudrup in the 90s.
Wow, I mean, off the bat right there, that tells us something. Had no idea he was held up sort of in that high of a regard, so already that's piqued my interest in terms of the rest of this reaction.
These quotes only form a small fraction of the praise that's been heaped on the incomparable Michael Laudrup because of what he was able to accomplish on the pitch. Scandinavia has been a breeding ground for some of the most iconic and talented football players to grace the footballing world throughout all of modern
dribbling already looks very good.
Players like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Christian Eriksen, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Brian Laudrup are only some of the players that have brought us such joy over the years, the latter of which is known as one of the greatest dribblers and overall players in his own right. However, in today's video, we're going to be taking a close look at the early life and playing career of his older brother, the father of La Croqueta himself, Michael Laudrup.
Okay, so he was the older brother.
One of the most famous members of Johan Cruyff's dream team and quite possibly the best ever Danish and Scandinavian player to ever lace up his boots. However, that last claim, that's for you to decide. And with that being said, how good was Michael Laudrup and what made him so special?
Very interested in this one because yeah, he was just way before my time,
and having a
like in the 90s,
very
wasn't it?
Interesting one coming up today. But before we get into it, do feel free to lightly tap that like button as it massively helps the channel out. But of course, no pressure. It's not like I'm watching you or anything right now. Anyway, let's get right into it. Born in 1964 in Frederiksberg, Denmark, Michael Laudrup was born as the son of Finn Laudrup, a former Danish international. So it only makes sense that he followed in his father's footsteps and began his footballing journey with Van Loos, his father's childhood club. However, due to his father getting a coaching job at Brøndby, he spent the majority of his development at Brøndby and København Boldklub, otherwise known as KB. It was at the latter that he made his professional debut in 1981, but it was at Brøndby where he truly began to shine. So just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here, when it came to Laudrup, at just 17 years of age, he was shaping up to be an extremely exciting player. Having been deployed in just about every position across the front line at a young age, it was in the attacking midfield role that he truly excelled. Not quite as advanced as a striker, not quite as deep as an 8, a true number 10.
Interesting.
A player with extremely quick feet, a good turn of pace, vision, and the ability to play accurately, perfectly weighted passes. However, he did have his shortcomings. After all, nobody's perfect. One of the main criticisms that he garnered even early on in his career was his unselfish nature. His ability to dribble past players and fashion goal-scoring opportunities was a true thing of beauty according to many that played alongside him. Despite this, he almost always chose to play his teammates in and opted not to go for goal himself. This undoubtedly contributed to his relatively low goal-scoring tally, which we'll get to
that's very interesting to learn.
Also, side note, finding reliable assist records from before the mid-90s is incredibly difficult. So I've essentially just gone ahead and not included them in this video. I hope that's not a problem. Anyway, moving along, between 1982 and 1983, Laudrup began showing the world what he was all about. In fact, at just 18 years of age, he won the Danish Player of the Year award, but this was only the beginning. In this 2-year period, he scored 24 goals in 38 matches. The big boys in Europe had seen enough, and by the start of the 1983-84 season, they were convinced that he was the real deal. And for all intents and purposes, it seemed as though Liverpool had won the race for his signature. Mind you, Liverpool went on to win the First Division, the League Cup, and the European Cup, now known as the Champions League that season. Yeah, they were no joke. However, when at last minute they changed the terms of the deal to include a 4-year contract as opposed to the 3-year contract they initially tabled, Laudrup decided that they may not be the best fit. So Laudrup essentially said, Well, I mean, I guess I'll go to Juventus then. A decent backup option. After all, they were the Italian champions at the time. So if you're sitting there thinking that this transfer was too good to be true, it's because it was. Upon arrival in Turin, Laudrup was met with the unfortunate reality that in Italy, like Spain and many other European nations, clubs were only allowed to field a certain set number of foreign players at a time. In the case of Serie A, that number was 3. And seeing as Juventus already had Michel Platini from France, Zbigniew Boniek from Poland, and Massimo Bonini from San Marino, Laudrup was the odd one out. The solution? Laudrup went off on loan to the recently promoted Lazio until a spot at Juve opened up.
Wow.
Red tape, am I right? Anyway, at Lazio he continued to improve, but understandably was not the finished product just yet. They were also not the strongest team at the time, only just avoiding relegation in his first season with them and ultimately falling victim to the drop the next. However, by 1985, Boniek had been shipped off to Roma, leaving a vacant spot for Laudrup to fill. While playing for Lazio, he managed 9 goals and 60 appearances. Alongside Platini, his first season with Juve proved to be a huge success. The Serie A, the 1985...
Yeah, Platini's another one that gets spoken about quite a lot on a couple of these reaction videos that we've done so far. And another player that I know literally nothing about, so he might be one worth checking out in the future. But really interested to learn some of the things about Laudrup so far. And I mean, looking at the clips, you know, in terms of like dribbling and things like that, he looks absolutely fantastic, makes it look so fluid and that sort of thing. And does look like a fairly sort of like tall and gangly player a little bit, but he just uses his body so well to just drift through
Danish
people.
Player of the Year award and 7 goals and 29 appearances. Remember, he was only 21 years old at this point. Unfortunately,
so still
regarding
really
his
young.
time in Italy, it was all downhill from here. Following the retirement of Michel Platini, Laudrup was expected to lead the line for Juve and become their midfield star. This proved to be a task too tall for our man at that point in his career. After 2 relatively disappointing seasons where no silverware was won and only 6 goals were scored in 54 matches, a change of scenery was the order of the day. Now this is the part of the story where the fun really begins. His next destination? None other than Barcelona at the start of the 1989-1990 season.
Okay, yeah, so Barcelona being the only club that I knew for a fact that he went ahead and played for, so I'm assuming this will be the peak of his career, which would be interesting.
So just to catch you all up on what's going on at Barca at the time, 1 year prior to Laudrup joining the club, Johan Cruyff had just returned to Barcelona as the manager. With him, he brought his signature footballing philosophy, a philosophy known as total football, an attack-orientated, possession-based style of football. With a guy like Laudrup at his disposal, Cruyff must have been in dreamland. It's also worth noting that the foreign player restrictions were enforced in Spain too, as I previously mentioned. In Spain, the number of foreign players allowed per match day was also 3. To accommodate for the foreign players that Cruyff believed he needed for his system to work, Gary Lineker, among many others, was sold to make room. This made way for Ronald Koeman, Mikhail Laudrup and Hristo Stoichkov to form part of the backbone of what would later be referred to as the Dream Team.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. Thinking about like how the Premier League is these days and things like that you're only like 3 foreign
such
players.
As Pep Guardiola to the mix, and you've got a real problem on your hands if they're up next on your fixture list. If you're unfamiliar with this story, you're probably thinking something along the lines of Dream Team, huh? Why on earth were they called that? Well, I'll tell you. 4 La Liga titles in a row between 1991 and 1994, a Copa del Rey in 1990, and the European Cup in 1992. And might I add, this was Barcelona's first ever European Cup victory in its entire history. Come to think of it, it's kind of crazy that their first one only came in 1992. I mean, that's relatively recent. I guess recency bias does play a huge role in my thinking in terms of that. Anyway, as far as Laudrup was concerned, he was absolutely flourishing. The through balls, the crazy vision, the sleek dribbles, he was on fire. In Cruyff's system, he was deployed in a role that can be likened to the false 9 role that Messi played in. As Cruyff's dream team typically played in a 3-4-3, Laudrup frequently started...
I must admit that I do have quite a fondness for these sort of players, like that playmaker, you know, a modern day false 9 or something like that. In terms of what I personally like the most, Laudrup's ticking a lot of boxes for me at the moment.
Position. However, as the false 9 name suggests, he wouldn't behave like a traditional number 9. He would drop back into the midfield line to confuse defenders more used to marking a traditional centre forward and contribute to the team's build-up play. In doing so, he was given a bit of freedom to do what he did best. The team did employ systems that used traditional frontmen on occasion though. For example, this was the lineup and formation for the 1992 European Cup final. Between 1989 and 1994, Laudrup scored 55 goals and 217 appearances
Amazing
in all
vision of passes as well,
His best season in terms of goals
came in the
1991-92 season, where he scored 18 goals and 49 appearances in all competitions. Now, while all this was great and Laudrup was enjoying probably the best period of his life from a footballing perspective, he also experienced what may very well be the biggest regret of his career. Let's rewind the clock back to 1990 and focus our attention on the international stage. After rising in the ranks of world football, Michael Laudrup was undoubtedly one of the best players in the world at this point. Alongside his brother Brian, Kim Vilfort and Peter Schmeichel and a few other notable names, Denmark had a pretty decent national squad. However, their combined might was not enough to secure qualification for the 1992 UEFA Euros, as they fell short to a formidable Yugoslavia team in their qualification group. But this wasn't all. In the middle of the qualification rounds, both Laudrup brothers chose to retire from the national team at 26 and 21 years of age respectively, due to falling out with the head coach Richard Nielsen. In Michael Laudrup's own words at the time, "I play football for the sake of joy and ambition, but in the past years I haven't felt happiness by playing on the national team. And now, when the athletic ambition have also disappeared, I've decided to stop." Well,
wow, imagine from like a Denmark perspective, like looking back on that team, that must be like such a what if scenario.
In a shock turn of events, Yugoslavia was banned from the Euros due to the ongoing Yugoslav wars at the time, meaning that Denmark was in. Given the call to return to the national team and represent his country, Brian Laudrup chose to accept the call. Mikhail, however, stood strong by his previous sentiments. And in an even more shocking turn of events, Denmark went on to win the whole thing. That's right, Michael Laudrup was in the prime of his playing career, but despite that, Denmark's greatest footballing achievement took place without him.
Wow, okay, yeah, I had absolutely no idea about that. Like, my international knowledge, when it comes to like the Euros or anything like that, like Greece winning it probably is like next to nothing, so wow, yeah, I wasn't expecting that whatsoever.
Back to Spain and reconvening our story in 1994.
Wow, I think that's the biggest twist we've had on one of these football reactions so far. Didn't see that coming whatsoever.
It was Cruyff. Although perhaps this was merely due to the incredibly high standards that Cruyff held Laudrup up to. According to Cruyff, Laudrup was one of the most difficult players that he'd ever worked with. When he gives 80 to 90%, he's still by far the best. But I want 100, and he rarely does that. These famous words uttered by Cruyff only served to fan the flame of what was a deteriorating player-coach relationship. Laudrup began to feel as though he was being unfairly singled out when he performed poorly. Even further to that, he felt like he wasn't getting adequate praise when he played well. And the fact that Barca decided to purchase the Brazilian Romario didn't help the situation. This meant that Barcelona now had 4 high-quality foreign players in Koeman, Laudrup, Stoichkov, and now Romario, with only enough room for 3 at a time. And the straw that broke their proverbial camel's back? In the Champions League final at the end of the 1993-94 season, Barcelona were faced up with an incredibly formidable AC Milan side and went on to suffer an embarrassing 4-0 loss. What's worse, Laudrup wasn't even selected for the matchday squad. In a post-match interview, Fabio Capello, Milan's manager at the time, stated, "Laudrup was the guy I feared, but Cruyff left him out, and that was his mistake."
Wow, that's crazy.
This statement is actually quite funny, seeing as Brian Laudrup was a Milan player at the time, and Capello opted not to select him for the final. Sadly, the Laudrup brothers never got a chance to face up against one another on the big stage. After weighing up his options,
it's kind of a disappointment, isn't it? That would have been a great story.
In Cruyff's footsteps in a way. Just as Cruyff had left Ajax for bitter rivals Feyenoord during his playing days, Laudrup went on to join Real Madrid at the beginning of the 1994-95
Oh wow, I didn't know he played for Madrid.
He was only 30 years old at the time. Even further to that, just as Cruyff had done with Feyenoord, Laudrup won La Liga with Real Madrid in his first season at the club, ending a stronghold on the league that he contributed to at his previous club. This made him the only player in history to win La Liga for 5 seasons in a row across 2 different clubs. It was pretty clear that Laudrup was the secret sauce. And if you need further proof, look no further than our Clásico. In the 1993-94 and the 1994-95 seasons of La Liga, our Clásico ended up with a 5-0 scoreline twice, once in each of those seasons. Barcelona and Real Madrid each came out with 1 win apiece. And if you haven't already guessed by now, Laudrup was on the winning side on both occasions. Essentially, he won 10-0. After only spending 1 more season with Madrid, Laudrup went on to play for Vissel Kobe in Japan in 1996 and then for Ajax in 1997. At the latter club, he helped them to a double which included the 1997-98 Eredivisie and the KNVB Cup. And finally, he retired from the game altogether in 1998. Just to wrap things up, from what this man was able to achieve, as well as how highly his fellow teammates and coaches speak of him, it's clear that he was the real deal. An argument can be made that he could have elevated his career even more had he chosen to lace up for the 92 Euros. But I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that this takes very little away from his legendary status. In my eyes, he was and still is well worth his title and then some. Mikael Laudrup, the Prince of Denmark. And there we have it.
Wow, such an interesting one. That a lot of the finer details throughout his career that I had absolutely no idea that were filled in on that reaction there. Really enjoyed that reaction here today. It's so interesting to have a look back on some of these players who maybe didn't win all those individual accolades back in the day, like it spoke about at the start of the video that he never won a Ballon d'Or. So it's so interesting to look into some of the context of these players who I've heard about sort of in passing and things like that, but I've never really spent time actually having a look into their career. So yeah, really enjoyed checking this one out today. As always, if you guys did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and get any of your other suggestions in the comments down below. Apart from that though, make sure to stay tuned to the channel for some more reactions coming up over the next few weeks. But apart from that, thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.